There are 3 rules: style over substance, attitude is everything, and live on the edge. And Cyberpunk has all 3. All the style, all the attitude, and all that edge. It's absolutely breathtaking.
On the contrary, you are the one who is in fact breathtaking.
But is it even any good? Well, my computer doesn't seem to really want to run it, and my PlayStation 4 honestly just wants to give up on life at the moment, so I don't really know. So let's make a ripoff of it using Blender, give it Wind Waker graphics, and stuff it in a Unity project until my computer crashes or I get bored. Okay, let's begin. So, let's start with character design. I was able to skip doing any sculpting or high poly modeling techniques and jump right into basic 3D modeling, as there isn't any need to bake down details onto a low poly mesh when you're trying to create a Wind Waker style character. I created a small reference board in PureRef of production artwork from both Cyberpunk 2077 and Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. From here, I worked on formulating a plan as to how I would interpret the high-fidelity detail of Cyberpunk in the stylized graphical world of Wind Waker. And since we're going for style over substance, we'll use this to ultimately inform our design decisions as to what we create and what we leave out. A good tip for if you're working on a low-poly character design is to use a lot of the proportional editing tools. This creates a fall-off effect to the surrounding geometry whenever you make a transformation. This can help you make more organic shapes and can keep your character designs from looking too rigid. After working on 3D modeling for a while, I had a character that was looking pretty good and was still pretty light in the poly count. Next, it was time to move on to texture painting, which I also did a large portion of in Blender. But for a lot of the smaller details, I exported my texture map to Krita. This allowed me to use things such as extra layers and a few features that you still don't have available in Blender's texture painting workspace. For me, I can instantly export my texture maps from Blender into Krita by selecting Image and Edit externally. To set this up, make sure to go to your Blender preferences, go to the File Path menu, and under Image Editor, select the Krita Launch EXE or the EXE of whatever image editing application you want to use. Now, if you go to your UV editor, select Image and Edit externally, it'll export your texture map into your image editing software of choice. Another thing that I made use of was the ability to export the UV layout of a given object. To do this, in the UV editor, go to UV, then Export UV Layout. Then I can drop this into Krita as a semi-transparent layer. This is also helpful if you're having trouble getting oriented as to where your UV faces are if you've already exported a texture map that you started in Blender. And as you can already see, I went ahead and created a few weapons for our character to pick up, along with some simple environment props that I'll be using to dress the scene in our Unity game engine project. For texturing, I wanted to try and get something that was a cross between the painterly textures of Legend of Zelda Wind Waker and the neo-urban metropolis of Cyberpunk. To do this, I simply got those basic textures from texture.com, imported them into Krita, and then passed them through some simple photo filters. No, seriously, all I did for all the textures was take each image, go to Filters, Artistic, and the first one I applied was the Posterize filter. I decreased the steps value to something from 4 to 8 for each image, and then when that was completed, I went to Filters, Artistic again, and then Oil Paint. I just played with the brush size and smoothness until I got something I liked. I also used Krita to create several sets of decals, such as the recognizable face which is printed on the back of his jacket, as well as the character's eyes, which are given a separate material and texture set. The next step was to start rigging my character in preparation for animations. I'm still a novice at this part, so I'll be leaving the links to my preferred animation and rigging resources in the description below like I have on the last videos. But in no time at all, my character was quickly learning how to walk and run all on his own. Well, not exactly on his own. We still need to import all these assets into Unity and create a playable game. Speaking of which, do you know anything about game design? Because I don't, so I think we're off to a good start. Luckily, there's a ton of super helpful resources out there, such as the now defunct Brackeys YouTube channel, which I mainly decided to try fitting all the assets I had created into the RPG tutorial series that was created by him and Sebastian Lague. But before I could jump into designing the core game mechanics, I would make one design decision that would no doubt prove to be controversial. No, I'm not switching the game into a first-person perspective. I'm gonna give it cel-shaded graphics. I know you're mad. Deal with it. I found some helpful resources on creating stylized cel-shaded cartoon graphics in Unity, and I began playing around with Unity's shader editor. I was probably able to learn Unity's shader editor a lot faster than I've been able to learn C# coding, probably because it functions in much the same way that Blender's node-based shader graph editor does. But after following a tutorial by Binary Lunar and making a few slight modifications of my own, I was able to create something that emulated Wind Waker's graphical style. With all those tasks out of the way, it was time for me to stop putting off designing the fundamental game mechanics and start learning some C#. Following the tutorial series by Brackeys and Sebastian Lague was pretty straightforward, and after brushing up on some math skills that I hadn't used in over a decade, coding really wasn't as scary as it was when I first started. Now, the possibilities of what you can do from here with coding is really pretty endless. You can develop a really awesome combat system, an interactive environment, and even put multiple levels in your game. Or if you're an artist like me, you can spend half a day focusing on ridiculous little details like making your character blink his freaking eyes. What am I doing with my life? And that pretty much wraps up everything that I created for this project. From the character, the environment, the props, the item pickups. Oh, yeah, I also made Jackie. He's pretty cool. He'll follow you around the city. Look at his face. Oh, wow. I was mainly just using him to try and test out building the combat system, but at the moment that kinda leaves something to be desired. Oh well, I can just patch it out like 6 months or so after the game releases. Which is currently slated for release never. Because if CDPR doesn't sue me, Nintendo sure as hell will. Social media links in the bio. Like and subscribe.